All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Real Estate Roundtable. I am excited to be here with you today. This program is very, very special because I'm here with my R.E.A.P family, and you're going to hear all about Project R.E.A.P today. Well, for those of you who don't know about Project R.E.A.P, you're going to learn about Project R.E.A.P. For those who already know about Project R.E.A.P, you're going to hear more about the history from its inception to where it is today. You're going to meet two of its esteemed alums, and they are going to discuss and share with you the journey that they have taken, how Project R.E.A.P have helped them in their career, and some of the things that they have a few nuggets to share. So today we have the founder of Project R.E.A.P, Mr. Mike Bush is here with us today, and we are excited to have him. He came up with this idea 22 years ago, and we are here today because of him. He has certainly helped us in our path and on our journey, in our profession, whatever path that has been. He has certainly helped me. The program has helped me. I don't want to speak for Lynn or Victor, but I'm sure they probably share that same thought that Project R.E.A.P has been beneficial, but you will hear from them. So today our panelists are Mr. Mike Bush, the founder of Project R.E.A.P, Miss Lynn Smith, who is an Atlanta 2002 graduate of Project R.E.A.P. Is that correct, Lynn?
Absolutely.
And then, thank you, and Mr. Victor Amu, who's a 2008 New York City graduate of Project R.E.A.P. Now, I'm going to give them each a minute to introduce themselves because I know I would not do them justice by just saying here, giving you their name and their title. You want to hear a lot more about them, and there's a lot more to share. And so I'm going to start off with our founder, Mr. Mike Bush. Mike, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Okay, Kaylin, first, I want to thank you for putting us on the air. Kaylin didn't mention it, but she is a R.E.A.P New York 17 graduate, class of 17. I want to thank Lynn and Victor for taking time out of their day as well. Lynn is, and you will hear more from them later, Lynn is the Director of Real Estate and Commercial Development for the Hartsfield Jackson Atlanta Airport. And Victor is an originator and underwriter of commercial loans for Basis Investment, which is a private Black-owned investment firm in New York. And Victor was in our second New York class. So that's our introduction. I can talk more about myself later on, Kaylin, or I can do more now. What's your preference?
I can just tell them a little bit more about who you are, where you are today, and then we'll get into the how you started R.E.A.P later on.
Okay, thank you. I began my career as a lawyer, but I haven't practiced law for 35 years, and it's been a great transition. Went to Washington in 1980 to join Giant Food, a regional supermarket, and went over to the business side as our landlord and site relations head in 1985. We had 80 landlords, and we were the place to go for developers. That gave us an edge in doing pretty much what the company wanted us to do. So I started R.E.A.P as a joint project with Giant, along with the Washington Urban League and the American Jewish Committee, on which I was an officer. We were joined by ICSC, the Shopping Center Conference, and the Jewish Committee and the Urban League had been seeking a joint project for many years, and this is what came out of that. Kaylin, back to you.
Well, thank you so much. Lynn, I'm gonna ask you to go next. Could you please tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing today?
Thank you very much, Kaylin, for having me and inviting me to join this great panel. As Mike mentioned, I have been graduate of R.E.A.P for a very long time in 2002/3. And I have enjoyed my journey ever since then. My entry into the commercial real estate industry started with Cushman and Wakefield. And I was there for quite a long time until the first downturn of 2009-10. I barely made it to 2011, but it was a great learning experience for me. And I worked in different aspects of the industry, including retail, industrial, office. And then from there, I went on to join the world's busiest airport in Atlanta. Of course, everyone knows that. And even in this time of crisis, we are still the busiest airport, and but we're going to get our numbers up right after this whole thing is over with. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Great, thank you, Lynn. And last but certainly not least, Victor, how are you?
I'm well, and thank you, Kaylin, for inviting me. And it's very nice to be with you all. You know, in terms of background, as Mike mentioned, I am a investment professional at Basis Investment Group, where I originate and underwrite commercial. And so since 2008, when I joined my predecessor company, Island Capital Group, which was a real estate private equity firm, and worked across 3 different strategies: principal investments, M&A, and ultimately real estate lending. And I've continued real estate lending for about the past 10 years. Prior to R.E.A.P, I worked at Bank of America on the trading floor, and so I joined R.E.A.P to help me transition to commercial real estate.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Did you all hear that? Listen to what they have done in just a few years. And Lynn said a long time ago, but I mean, we can't believe that, Lynn. You look like you just got the right to drink, you know, like you just celebrated that 21st birthday. So I'm not quite sure how long ago it is that you graduated R.E.A.P, but we're so happy to have you all here today.
Let me just give you a little bit of background on Lynn's entry into the industry, because it was typical of a few of the challenges that we encountered. I won't mention the company because they may be helping us today, but first of all, we had a tough time persuading them to join the program, and I ultimately had to go to their main office and meet with their chairman. And he said, well, why are we not doing this? And I said, I don't know. And he said, well, you call so-and-so and in Atlanta, and he will join. So-and-so was not happy about joining, but he had no choice. Lynn came, and she came as a broker, and I checked in with him a few months later, actually a year later, and I said, how's she doing? And he said, you wouldn't believe this. He says, she's already covering her desk, which means that she's bringing in enough commissions to pay for what it cost. Am I right, Lynn? Is that what it means, covering your desk?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I was happy to be there. I learned quite a bit. You know, real estate keeps me young.
Well, it's doing a great job. It's doing its job. Well, Mike, you know, we're going to go to Lynn and Victor shortly, but we want to hear about, you know, what really Why did you start R.E.A.P?
Well, in the 90s, I came to Giant in the 80s, and in the 90s, I had been there enough time to see that we had several black store managers in our, at that time, 120 store chain, and they were clearly best in class. They were not recognized as much as I thought they could be. We also had 80 landlords, but none of them had black property managers. And when I asked why, they said, we don't know how to find capable minorities. The other thing was that I went to a networking event for one of our trade associations, and there was one black colleague among 1,500 white guys. And I thought that this is not the right way to do it. So I went back to Giant, and Giant said, you tell us what we should do. So I said, well, you need to back this venture between the Urban League and the American Jewish Committee. Our chair agreed to it immediately. We came up with the proposal, which was basically that we would recruit top talent from all different professions, architecture, banking, construction, engineering, finance, law, and with the help of the Urban League did our recruiting. The program was marketed through the Washington Post. We were a major advertiser in the Post at that time, and so our advertising guy called the Post and said, we need an article on R.E.A.P. So the article appeared, and we had 80 applicants for 25 spots. The Urban League handled screening the applications, and we had our first class. The students also had to have a bachelor's and 3 to 5 years of business experience. The jobs were in property management, which is a traditional port of entry into the commercial real estate business. And the program was basically education, networking, and hiring. So the white guys who were teaching networked with our students, and then at the end of the year, we had 7 companies, and we chose the top 7 in the class and placed them with those companies. It was a very simple model. There was nothing like it then, and sad to say, there is nothing like it now. There is no competition. We would welcome competition. So 1998 was our charter class. We placed 7 of our graduates. 6 of them are still in the industry. Of course, they've moved to different companies now because that was 22 years ago. Today in 2020, we have thousands of graduates, and we have over 400 like Lynn and Victor in management and executive positions in 9 cities across the United States. So LA, Chicago, Dallas, Kansas City, Atlanta, Washington, New York.
Great, that is a great background. But I want to ask you one more question before I move on to Victor and Lynn. And that is, did you face any obstacle while you were starting R.E.A.P? And if so, what were those obstacles 22 years ago?
Well, our primary obstacle was that the developers that we wanted to teach, like the outfit that hired Lynn, were not happy about doing this. The commercial real estate is a legacy existence. That is, you pass your contacts and your wealth on from family to friend to colleague, and they were not interested in broadening that circle. But in Washington, they wanted giant store leases in their centers because we were a good anchor for their pro forma. That was the first obstacle. The second obstacle was raising money to fund the program. We were not an expensive program. Basically, we had 2 people on staff and some travel expenses, but it was always touch and go, and we actually went through 5 insolvencies in the first 10 years. We approached 5 insolvencies. Each time we were able to address them. So that was those were the obstacles.
Well, I am happy that, you were able to address them, and I'm sure there were some allies there. We're going to come back to you to hear about who those allies are and who they were at that time. But before we do so, I just want to go back to Lynn and to Victor and to ask them what led them to R.E.A.P and what obstacles were they facing, why they thought it was necessary. R.E.A.P was something they wanted to be a part of, or to get on this path. I know Lynn is in Atlanta, and I believe there's a storm there right now. So we're going to go over to Victor, and then we're going to go back to Lynn momentarily. Victor?
So, in preparation, I actually went back to figure out how I first learned about R.E.A.P and when. And so I went back to my email, and it turns out I actually first heard about R.E.A.P in February of 2007. And at that time, I had been at Bank of America for about a little over 2 years, and I was up for a promotion. And and at that time, I worked on the trading floor in distribution of real estate bonds, so commercial mortgage-backed securities, residential mortgage-backed securities, and so forth. And as everyone knows at this point, we were in the middle of a run-up in commercial real estate prices. At that time, I had realized that while I enjoyed the energy and passion of the trading floor, my original interest had always been architecture, and so I wanted to get back to really to the tangible nature of the underlying real estate, of the underlying real estate that was behind the bonds that we were selling. And so I started thinking about what my next steps would be, and realized that while I had understanding of real estate in a general sense, I didn't have I didn't have the level of detail of understanding that I would like in how R.E.A.P was structured at the time. I'm not sure if it's changed. There was 2-week intensives on many different topics. So development, leasing, the investment side that I was more familiar with, brokerage, and so many different aspects of the business which I was not familiar with, which I thought would help me in managing that transition to what I was looking for, either a real estate development firm or a real estate private equity firm, which I eventually ended up at.
And you're currently at a private equity firm at this time?
Now I'm at a private lender.
A private lender. Okay.
Yep.
And we'll hear more about that shortly. But we're going to go back to Lynn, who has rejoined us. And Lynn, you're muted.
It's a terrible storm going on here, but we're going to try to make it through. Well, we will make it through. So my interest in commercial real estate, I've always had interest. I've never really been involved with residential real estate. I just kind of took the leap and joined Project R.E.A.P to learn about the commercial side of things. And our program, can say, was very, very tough back then and very involved, and very good speakers coming in to teach us all about the industry and the different aspects of the industry. And Cushman & Wakefield greeted me and really allowed me freedom to learn and grow and work with different teams, and just be with them out in the field, doing analysis, working on big accounts, on small mom and pop accounts. So I truly appreciate the experience that I had with them over the years. And I really continue to be excited about the industry. And once the downturn came in 2008, on up to 12, it really impacted quite a bit. And it really hit a lot of minorities in the industry. One area that Cushman & Wakefield was extremely supportive of me was allowing me to put on the Global Diversity Summit, which was an excellent event that attracted lots and lots of minorities in the business from all over, literally the world. We even had someone from the Narita Japanese airport. So it was an eye-opener to many people that came in to the convention to hear people talking about what they have been doing over the decades, what their challenges were, but what their successes were. So I stayed in the industry and I joined the Atlanta airport, and I really love working there. It's owned by the city of Atlanta. And fortunately, at the airport, we do have a lot of minority qualified people in place, and they truly believe in that. They're supportive of the people that come in, and it's helped me to grow now in the airport arena. And I'm looking forward to my continued expansion in this industry.
Great. Well, thank you. There's a lot going on in the chat. Thank you all. Just want to say that if you do have questions, however, please type them in the Q&A and we will try our best to answer them as we go along. So put your questions in the Q&A. You can continue to speak about yourself in the chat, but would love to have your questions in the Q&A. I keep on hearing, I heard it from Mike, I just heard it from Lynn. Mike spoke about capable minorities. Lynn just talked about qualified minority. So here, these are things that we're hearing over and over again. And Mike, it's interesting to hear you say that, right? You wanted to make sure that people know they were capable minorities out there who could be in the commercial real estate industry. So tell me, who were some of your allies that supported that vision, that supported you in bringing that attention to minorities and getting them involved in the commercial real estate space, so it would not just be legacy for the family and friends?
The New York program got an interesting start because I was on vacation and I got a call from my boss who said, Walmart wants to talk to you. And this was 2003, 4, 5, I can't remember when. And they said, we're going to come to New York, we're going to teach, we're going to hire. So our New York class had 36 people in it. It was, as Lynn pointed out, that was the time that the industry was on its way up. And Walmart came and ended up hiring 6 of our graduates, persuading them to go to Bentonville. So you can imagine the enthusiasm that they were able to generate. We still have 2 graduates from our original class in Bentonville. We spoke to a couple of them the other day. And Donald's came on. Cushman, as Lynn mentioned, Cushman, CB, JLL, Simon Property Group on the retail side, the Rouse Company, which was acquired by General Growth. So once
Ackerman.
You had, excuse me?
Ackerman,
yes. Ackerman was really the reason we went to Atlanta in the first place. because I met Charlie Ackerman through the American Jewish Committee, which was one of our local sponsors. And Charlie said, you've got to come to Atlanta. And he was the kind of guy who did not take no for an answer. He said, I will get you 7 sponsors. So we came and he hired one of our graduates, and he brought Simon, Duke Realty, and a couple of local, two or three more local firms who all participated. Atlanta has been a very productive program. The Gap came. You know, it's like any new idea. If the people you respect or fear are doing it, then you know that you should do it. And that's still the case. Although until, and I'll save this for a few minutes later, and until recently, the move to hire diverse talent in any industry had slacked off considerably. The 2009 recession hurt us, and then the kind of the aftermath of that, the companies were not, they were letting their white employees go, so they were not about to hire our graduates. That changed in the last a couple of years, and I think will accelerate rapidly as I describe what's going on. The trade associations were very helpful. ICSC, which gave us the texts for our first program, the Urban Land Institute, NAIOP, BOMA, National Multi-Housing Council. So, you know, we're now in 9 cities with 400 plus associates. I think I mentioned that before.
Let me mention too, and also not only did companies support R.E.A.P, but membership industry organizations such as NAIOP, SIOR, ICSC, a number of them were very supportive in what we were trying to do. They would allow many of their members to come in and train. We went to meetings, we went to conventions. So it was a holistic experience.
And I want to underline what Lynn said about the Global Diversity Summit, because that did start in Atlanta and ran for a number of years, again, till the recession happened. But we did have people from all over the country. I didn't know we had them from Japan, but that's good to hear.
Well, you know, we are now, and the executive director reminded us, Asa, who is on with us. Asa, thank you for all that you do as well. She's one of them that's, you know, flying the R.E.A.P flag very high. We have now more than 1,300 graduates from R.E.A.P, right? And you have said we're now in over 9 cities. What is the case? How has the program evolved over the years? It's 22 years later. It's certainly not what it was 22 years ago, or even a decade ago after the downturn. How has it evolved?
The short answer is that we began as a property management school, and we are now teaching all the real estate disciplines, development, investment, brokerage. I think we may be teaching real estate law in some cities, and our students have been in the industry but have found their paths blocked within their own companies by the same old people who refuse to recognize their talent. So one of the things we've been doing, and I spend a lot of my time doing this, is counseling our graduates who are plateaued and do not have a way of advancing to either move to another company or get in touch with someone who can help them at their company. The same issues that plague white women and black women in corporate America are duplicated in commercial real estate. People who hold the same responsibility will be minorities and women who hold the same responsibility will be paid less than white men. And that goes back to the nature of the industry. We do not expect to change the nature of the industry tomorrow, but we do expect by continuing to introduce talent like Victor and Lynn that their eyes will open and they will realize that diversity is a bottom line factor. Lynn and Victor don't just occupy a desk. They add bottom line value, dollars. And that's what speaks to the people that run the companies and do the hiring.
I agree with you, Michael. Lynn, you're not just occupying the desk. You have done enough to pay for the desk. You're capable,
Absolutely.
you're talented, you're just as qualified as anyone else who could sit, at that desk. And so you have now graduated R.E.A.P for it's been 18 years. How has it evolved? How has CRE evolved from your perspective, having been in the industry for so long? How are you received? I think Mike gave us a little hint that you weren't that well received in the beginning, but how were you received and how has it evolved for you since then?
I can tell you my journey has been to stay connected with people who have, made the footprints in front of me. So I saw one of the statements in the chat room come up that they wish that this was in the Bay Area. So early on, R.E.A.P did a lot of, they partnered with Reese, Real Estate Executive Council, and Victor McFarlane was in Oakland, and we had him involved with Global Diversity Summit. And so it's a lot of people who I have learned from, Rich McCoy in New York, just a number of names I can just list off. And most recently where I met Lamont Blackstone, who is involved with R.E.A.P right now and leading the way. I met him at Global Diversity Summit. And so you stay in touch with the many folks that have come to meet you and talk to you, and just don't be afraid to just step to them and say, hi, I'm so-and-so, this is what I'm doing. I want to call you. I want to stay in touch. And, or, just ask about that empty seat that they have there where they can utilize your talent to help, where you can bring value to the table for them. So it's been a great path that I'm on. I'm still traveling. I'm still learning.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Victor, you have you've transitioned a bit since graduating, and you wanted to get back into the architecture side. But how has things evolved for you since then?
Yeah, so, I think one of the things that, everyone should be aware of, with commercial real estate is that it's a cyclical business, right? And so you have to understand that first and foremost. And I think you really just have to understand sort of what the drivers of the business are. So I joined commercial real estate in 2008. And so that was an interesting time to obviously make an entry, but it was, it's really my interest, right? And so I think that when I went in for, that interview, I think that, the firm could understand that it was really my passion. And so I think, and while, architecture, was sort of the underlying factor, real estate is really about, cash flows. And so I think that, what I impressed upon that initial employer was that I had the passion, and then I also, understood the cash flows and could help their bottom line, which has been mentioned before. But I think that in order to have a career that is lasting in the industry, is that while R.E.A.P was that sort of initial education, you've got to build upon that. And so I think that R.E.A.P I actually learned about from someone I met in the Urban Land Institute. So it was a student who had been in the I think New York 2006 class, Annie Yao. So I met her at a Urban Land Institute event, and she mentioned it to me. And I also had the pleasure of meeting Susan Chapman, who was at Citibank back at that time. And she, I asked her about R.E.A.P, and she said it's a great program. You got to reach out to Mike Bush. And so I think that, first and foremost, real estate is a people business. And so I think if you're constantly expanding your network, and then if you're constantly learning, you're constantly growing and evolving. And so I think that there are constant evolutions in the business. And so, one of the things that has upended the industry is, single family rental. And there's constantly just innovation in the business. And I think if you can stay at the forefront of that, you can, both stay interested as well as sort of constantly reinventing yourself. And so in my last job, I had probably 3 different jobs before I switched firms. So I started out in principal investments. I went into M&A, and then became a lender. And all of that I learned on the job. And so where I couldn't learn it, from those around me, I had to be, pretty entrepreneurial and creative in terms of trying to figure out the tools that I needed. And now at my current employer, I've worked, many different assets of lending, be it CMBS, Freddie small balance loans on the agency side, mezzanine lending. And so, I think it's really about constantly learning and constantly challenging yourself. And then ultimately, with your clients, constantly providing value to them. And so one of the real sort of full circle moments for R.E.A.P is that, some of the folks who were, who I met in R.E.A.P back in 2008 are now brokers I work with, clients I work with, or people I talk to about different deals. And so I think that that's one of the things that has become exciting for me at this stage of my career, is that now I get to work with, I get to work with clients who are friends. And so I think it becomes that much more enriching and fulfilling, because you're learning from and working with and hopefully growing wealthy with people you care about beyond just the deal.
Let me just comment on what Victor said and what Lynn mentioned. She mentioned the Real Estate Executive Council. The Real Estate Executive Council was founded in 2004 with 4 or 5 companies led by a Chicago firm called Capri Capital. Today, REIS has dozens of members, and the chair of R.E.A.P is the founder of the firm that Victor is with. Tammy Jones is the chair of the Real Estate Executive Council. And that's significant because, one, there are a lot more Black-owned and women-owned investment firms, and that allows those firms to have leverage that women and Black owners and lenders did not have. So in 16 years, that ground has changed significantly.
Thank you. And would you say that R.E.A.P had some part to play in that, Mike?
I think the what R.E.A.P recognizes is that, as Frederick Douglass said, power gives up nothing without a struggle, and neither does money. The industry, even today, is less than 1% Black. Some people will say, don't you think it could be 2% maybe? And I said, okay, you want 2%? 2% is okay. It's way short of what it should be. 5% women in positions, executive and management positions. Some people would say it should be 7%. Okay, I won't argue with that. The industry is a legacy network. Power and money is handed down for decades to the friends, family, and colleagues of the people that are there. This was something that R.E.A.P mission is directed at. We want to be a part of that network. The reason that network is so powerful is because they continue to recruit in the traditional pools, the friends, the family, and colleagues. They're not exposed to Black talent. They're not required to interview Black talent. They're not required to invest in Black firms and projects. They're not required to see that some of those projects go to Black firms. So that needs to be addressed, and the way to do that is for Black people in commercial real estate to create a mirror network using or through groups like REIS, LinkedIn, ULI, A.R.E.A.P New York, which is now called CURE, A.R.E.P DC, which all of them have tremendous networks, and they have begun to work together. There have been a number of joint webinars over the past few months where those groups are putting on joint programs. I think what's happened in the last month, the Black Lives Matter movement has provoked a dramatic change in the industry. Just one example, the Urban Land Institute that Victor mentioned, and that many of our R.E.A.P associates have been active in, pledged online a dramatic pledge to hire more Black staff, to hire more women and Blacks in leadership positions, and to recruit their members, them as members. And we've had particular interest. I personally have talked to executives with Brookfield and Hines, two of the biggest operators in the business. They say, what can we do? I think we have to take advantage of this because it's not going to last. And everybody gets excited. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And then people stop doing it. I think the one thing that we can do as a group is to insist, not to have a 10-point platform, not to have 7 things that companies should do, but just to require that the Rooney Rule, R-O-O-N-E-Y, the Rooney Rule that came out of the NFL, require that companies interview at least one minority for every executive or management position, and that there be a mechanism for tracking that either through the chief diversity officer or some mechanism. And this is not going to be easy, but it can be done, and it's a metric. So if there is a chief diversity officer, they have to have staff, budget, and authority to require that the interviews occur. This is not going to be easy, but once the first company does it, other companies will follow. So we're working with those companies, the two that I mentioned, and the trade associations like ULI, ICSC, and so forth, to make that happen. Because this window that regrettably George Floyd opened, and somebody says, well, he's looking down and saying, I didn't die in vain, it will not be open for long. So we need to move on it.
Thank you, Mike. You have commented on, something that I was going to get to, and we have a couple questions in the Q&A, and I'm going to ask one because it relates to what you just spoke about, and that is, we're in the midst of a pandemic and social change, and how has perspective changed during this time, or perception changed during this time? I know we just heard from you, Mike. Lynn, Victor, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. In the midst of this pandemic and social change, has perception changed? Do you believe so?
What I'll say to that is, I think that look, you can't necessarily what you can change, or what you can control is your reaction to events, right? I mean, certain events you can't control. And so what I try to focus on are those things which are within my control. And so, as I mentioned, my entry into this business was in 2008, probably the worst time one could enter the business. And my firm, was created in 2009, 2010, in the middle of a recession. So I think that it's important to look at these times of change as also times of opportunity. And so I think that because there are, yes, things are extremely difficult, and I don't want to belittle that at all. But I think there are, ways to navigate that. So for example, we can't be together physically, but we're all participating here in this webinar, in 3 different cities around the country. And so I think with the advent of technology, we are able to stay in touch, much more in a much easier fashion than ever before. Similarly, I've been working from home for the last 4 months, but through Zoom, we've been operating seamlessly, and we continue to lend in this environment. And so I think it's really about, and likewise, while there are challenges, in the profession of, being, one of a few, I think, again, there's opportunities to take, to make the best of that. So, for example, the flip side of being one of the only people at a 1,500 person conferences, it's pretty easy to remember me. And so, and in that regard, I think that what I've realized, that if I do a good job, in commercial real estate, or if I impress a client or what have you, people tend to remember. And so my impact is high, is amplified both negatively and positively. So I think that, yes, we all are constantly made aware that we are, fortunately or unfortunately, we are representatives in a way. And so, maybe even a smaller crowd than commercial real estate is real estate private equity. And so, I was often sort of the, only one in the room. But I think the benefit is, if you do a good job, it then encourages more to come behind you. And so that's, the way I try to look at it. And that's the perspective I try to hold.
Lynn, anything to add to that? Has there been a change in perception since this pandemic and social change that we're experiencing?
Well, I mean, I too definitely believe, and this is an opportunity for many folks, whether it's an opportunity to go forward in a strong way in what you believe your passion is, or for some, it might be to pivot and go in a different direction. But either way, there's no reason to sit down and do nothing. You know, find the strength within you. You can work hard on extra educational things that you need to learn. If you have to work with someone and, you know, get paid a lower salary, just know that you're bringing value to the table, and it will change. It will be noticed, and you can grow from there.
Kayla, let me just mention, you have to be networked with a large number of people so that when an issue comes up, you can go to someone and vent to them and get their feedback, because they may have gone through the same thing already and addressed it either at their own company, either at the company they're with, or move to a new company. You just can't sit still. And I think our panelists today are evidence of how people dealt with this.
Well, we have a few questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to just go ask those questions, and then we have a few more, and we might just be a few minutes over. Those of you who can stick with us, please do. But let's get to one of the questions. It's related to the pandemic. It says, how should I navigate seeking positions during this COVID-19 season, being new to the commercial side of real estate? The person said, I've reached the 3rd round of interviews with JLL in March, right before the pandemic, and now I feel halted. Anyone wants to address that?
There was another panel today in Chicago, and one of the officers of JLL led that panel, Damona Strautmanis. She was a former president of R.E.A.P, DC. If you send me your email, I'll connect you with her, and she can advise you. I obviously it's harder to interview these days, but I can tell you that we just placed a woman in Atlanta who had been out of work for 6 months, very talented, and you know, we made it happen, even though it was all virtual.
And Lynn, this is a question directed at you. You may be able to answer, but I believe this is probably more appropriate for USA. It says, Lynn mentioned that the program was difficult back then. How does the program differ then from now? Are you able to answer that, Lynn?
Not difficult might not be the word. It was very challenging. Lots of reading, books, tests, lots of paperwork. But you had your peer sitting next to you struggling just like you were, and you all just worked together and you made it happen. So I think we just had a lot more paper and reports and things that we had to do. So it was interesting. It was very, very interesting, eye-opening. So if commercial real estate wasn't for you, that's the time when you would have realized it, just from seeing all that you had to do
at that time.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then there's another question, and I'm sure you know, some may have typed this in the chat already. And the question is, how can someone, I guess they meant with foundational CRE and not that, with foundational CRE knowledge, get involved in R.E.A.P?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the beauty of the program, I think Lynn kind of spoke to this, is that everyone comes in, you know, at various levels, right, and has their various, you know, sort of domains of expertise. So, you know, in my class, you know, I was one of a few folks who came from sort of, you know, the investment banking or the investment side, but, you know, down the road from me was, you know, a practicing architect. You know, further down the road was, you know, corporate attorney. There were some folks, you know, from nonprofit sectors. And so, you know, I think what was the benefit is that when we went through each module, you know, each person's strengths were displayed. And so, you know, you were able to better understand, you know, certain aspects of it by both the instructors who came in, who were, you know, who had the expertise in the field, but also some of your classmates as well. You know, and so I think that, you know, that is just the one added strength that you have going into the program, which, you know, hopefully should make the outcome when you leave the program that much better.
I would totally agree with what Victor said. I went into the program in 2017 with a legal background. And, you know, I mean, there were people from the architecture side, construction, you know, there were all these talents in the room, and you really learn from each other, you grow, you become better. And I think that that is one of the things that this program offers, that, as Mike said, we need some competition. It would be good competition, but we don't have it. There's room for you at the table, regardless of what, you know, your bachelor, some working experience, but regardless of what that's in, you come to the table, you will have something to offer, and you will learn a lot from your peers in the room. There's one other question here that says, will there be any mentorship opportunities?
Go ahead, Lynn.
So ever since I graduated from this program, Mike has been literally by my side, literally. He is the consummate matchmaking, introduction, stay in touch. Okay, what are you doing now? How can I help you now? He is really, really, really diligent with that, and he's genuine with that. And so whomever goes through this program, as long as Mike Bush knows you, you will stay relevant in this industry as long as you give it all that you have.
Thank you, Lynn. I want to point out I'm only one person. And
we don't know that. We don't know that.
You don't know that. Okay. But there are mentors, you know, you have to network, and you'll find other mentors. But thank you, Lynn.
That is for sure. And again, we are just so grateful that we know you, and we've had the privilege of really being able to call on you and others in the community to really assist us. So it's not a formal mentorship, which is probably where the question was going, but there's a lot of mentorship and helping each other. And I know also wanted us to point out, like, the focus of R.E.A.P, it's not just Black Lives or Black Lives Matter, but, you know, it's minorities, whether you're Black, Latino, Asian, you know, regardless, if you're a woman, you're a minority, the program caters to you as well. I'm going to ask two final questions before we go. And I'm going to just ask, you know, whoever wants to answer it, whether it's Mike, Lynn, or Victor, what is it that you would recommend that companies do differently going forward to increase diversity and inclusion in commercial real estate?
I want to answer the previous question about mentorship. I'm sorry, Kaylin, not to answer your question directly, but there is a mentor in your company, and if you haven't found him or her, you just have to look harder. One of the ways to do that, again, it's networking, is to find a person that you think is going to be receptive and ask them what they do. Everybody in our industry is always anxious to talk about what they do and how good they are at what they do. And you will find, you have to ask a bunch of people before you find somebody who's going to ask you back, and what are you doing? And if you say to someone, how can I help you on what you're doing? You got to be available, and not everyone's going to be responsive. As we all know, there are people that are never going to be responsive, and they're going to be hurtful. But you need to plumb that that pool in your own company. And if you don't find anybody there, maybe it's time to move along.
I would also, to add on to the mentorship, you don't just need one, you need many. So those organizations that were mentioned earlier, ULI, NAIOP, et cetera, they have mentor-mentee programs that you can also jump in, you know, and really gain some valuable insight on what that person does. They match people together. Crew is very good with that as well. So
we only have time for one more question because we are a little over, we've gone over time, but I'm gonna ask this last question, and then we're just gonna ask each for panelists to just leave some final thoughts with the R.E.A.P community. I mean, an hour is just not enough for all that we wanna talk about. But then Miles had a question. He said, what other window of opportunities have you seen open up in the, I guess, on the investment side of commercial real estate or residential?
Well, you know, I think that, you know, the way to approach that question, you know, really is to, you know, look out and see sort of where, you know, where the gap in the market is. You know, I don't think it's always necessarily obvious, but definitely in the last downturn, one of the big gaps was single family rental housing, right? It had never been institutionalized as an asset class, but there were a lot of difficulties in terms of economies of scale. And so I think that, you know, one of the big themes that we see right now is the affordable housing crisis. We saw that Tishman Speyer just launched an affordable housing business, things like that. So I think really the point, and sort of and I think it dovetails into both Mike and Lynn's earlier point, is that if you stay networked and if you stay informed, I think these are the types of things that you will become abreast of. And so I'd echo Lynn's point in that, you know, the mentorships don't necessarily have to be formal. So if you are, you know, active within the R.E.A.P alumni network, if you are active within ULI, MBA, CREFC, so many different real estate organizations, you will be at the forefront of what's happening in the innovation in the industry, and as such, you will be, you know, one of the first to hear about whatever new opportunity is there. And moreover, I think a lot of key decisions that are made ultimately happen when you're not in the room. And so if you're well networked enough, people will come to you, and you will come to mind for people as someone who could you know, be beneficial of that new opportunity. And that, I think, is sort of the ultimate way to really benefit from these changes and these new trends in the industry.
Okay, we're out of time, but any final thoughts or tips that we want to leave with this community?
You've done a great job, Kaylin. Thank you.
Thank you. You're always a champion for us all. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I just think people just keep your eyes open and just reach out for any opportunity, even if you have to shadow someone, even if you have to ask, can I work on that project with you, just to learn, and just stay at it. Believe me, it comes. There's so much out here, so much out here.
Thank you, Lynn. Victor, any final thoughts?
You know, I think that sometimes, you know, a lot of, you know, your career will be determined by luck, but ultimately, I think the harder you work, the luckier you become. So I think that's what you can control, and so that's what I'd focus on doing.
Great. Well, I want to say a very special thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate it. You've shared so much with us, and I'm sure there are other questions. And I'm just going to say, with your permission, I know Mike had said someone could email him. If you are okay, we can't get to all the questions. I know Nicole asked for Mike's email. If you send me a message, I will send that email to you if I have your permission to do so, Mike or Lynn. If someone wants to, as they've said, network, they are offering They're saying to you, reach out to me. And if you want to be in touch with them, I will share that information. They have made that offer to you. We are a community. Our goals are aligned. I want to make sure that R.E.A.P continue. 22 years later, we will still be here. We will still be that pipeline. We will still be able to get talented. You know, Mike, you talk about it. We are talented. We're capable, right? We have the knowledge. We have the know-how. We're qualified. And there's no reason why we should not be in the same room. There's no reason why we should not have a seat at the table. And here is your opportunity. You want to get into commercial real estate? R.E.A.P is one vehicle to get there. R.E.A.P alums, if you're already there and you need help, you're stuck, get unstuck. Mike is here to help. A lot of us are here to help. We will help however we can, but we need to do better, right? The industry needs more of us, and we have to continue on that path. We are out of time, but thanks a lot. It's great being here with you. Another Tuesday Real Estate Roundtable. And until next week, have a fabulous week. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.